to come together to protect our babies. Before I go over the list of what this legislation would do if passed, I'll turn it over to my fellow Marine, Representative Parkinson, and then Senator Green, and any other representatives that want to make comments. Then I'll go over the bullet point list, and we'll be happy to entertain any questions. Antonio?
Thank you. Simplify.
Simplify.
Simplify. Here come the Marines. Simplify means always faithful. And that's the way we should be with our citizens and protecting our babies. And first of all, before I even start, I just want to thank my colleague from across the aisle, Representative Van Huss, who came up with this idea, came and talked to me about it and invited me in, and I was eager and excited to join. It's always even more special when it's coming from a fellow Marine, you know, because we love to pat each other on the back for things that are great ideas. And that's no slight to the Army people that are here either. So,
yeah, but none taken.
Right. But you know, this is important. This is very important. You know, we're talking about the lives and protecting the lives of our babies. And with this act, with this idea, with this strategy, with this bill, we will actually be doing something. And that's what's important also. You know, and last time we met when we were talking about this, we were talking about the need for us as a legislature to do something. And this act is just that. It is doing something, putting action behind our influence, behind our power here at the state, and actually doing something to protect our babies. This is an example for the country. And I hope that the country takes heed to what we're doing here in Tennessee with this bipartisan approach to making sure and ensuring the safety and the security of our children and our teachers and all of those that work in our educational institutions to make sure that their lives are protected. And this also displays for us, Micah and Senator and everyone else, that we value the lives of our babies above everything.
That's right.
And with that, I will hand it over to Senator Green, and then Representative Mike Stewart, Chairman Mike Stewart, and then others that want to speak.
Well, it's a real honor to help on the other side of the building with this bill. The opportunity to provide protection to Tennessee's children is an opportunity that I could not say no to. And what better than to have a few veterans, Marines, Special Operations, be a part of this and look at how do we protect the most vulnerable, these children. There are a lot of issues that surround this, a lot of things that have to be fixed that this bill doesn't necessarily address. And Representative Van Huss will come up in a minute and give you all the details. But this is a quick emergency response that we can make that will bring resources to protect these children. And it's something that we can do in this legislative session and something we have a responsibility to do and are doing. And again, guys, thanks for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you to the sponsors for inviting me to this press conference. Obviously, this bill places trained armed officers at our schools. Who could disagree with that? It's a classic example of people working together to get a job done. When you've got a military platoon, as everybody up here knows, you don't have Democrats and Republicans. You have patriots working together on a mission for their country. That's what we're seeing here today with these sponsors. This bill takes a common sense approach to address this critical issue of school safety. I can't imagine that there's anybody up here that would disagree with it.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me be a part of this too. I can't think of any three men that have more experience in protecting our country than to come up with a bill that will help protect our schools. And two, of course, two Marines and one Army, and so we're proud of them, proud of what they're doing, and I'm proud to be a part of this. Thank you.
Well, I'm not a military person, but I'm a mother and a grandmother who has children in public schools. And I would just say, number one, thank you for inviting me to be here. But I would just say that Houston, we have a problem. And we're going to have to start addressing this. Because when we drop our children off at school and we go on to work, we're leaving them thinking all's cool, everything's well. But that's not our culture now, ladies and gentlemen. That's not what we're facing. And we're going to have to handle it. And I'm proud that, you know, we have taken a step forward. And I'm proud to be up here with my colleagues on both sides because we both have children. We all have children. We're grandparents. And our children should go to learn and not have to go and be worried about if they're going to get home to have supper with the family that night. So yes, we have a problem, and we're going to deal with it, and we're going to make our schools safe, and we're going to do what we have to do that. So thank you for being here, and thank you for letting me be a part.
All right, folks, let's go over real quick what this legislation would do should we be successful. First of all, for LEAs, LEAs do not have to participate in this program. This program would help secure our schools by enabling our off-duty, post-certified law enforcement officers to work security at Tennessee Public Schools. Again, LEAs do not have to participate. This is not mandatory. Each LEA will receive a list of interested officers from law enforcement agencies in their area, very much similar to what the substitute teacher list is now. I did substitute teaching for 7 years in Washington County. I kind of want this to be a similar situation where folks can pre-plan a schedule for folks to come work security, but if the need arises at 6 a.m., they could get the call and accept to be able to come in to do this. Each LEA will keep a timesheet of which officers work at each school. The LEA will regulate the wearing of uniforms or not. The LEA will also regulate whether the weapons will be open or concealed. The LEAs will as well regulate the use of rifles, whether or not that's allowed or not, where they're stored, etc. This would only apply to school days and after-school events, not practices, because some sports go year-round. So this would be school days and school events. Only 2 officers per school will this program pay for. Public schools only. The program will be offered regardless of how many current SROs are at schools. If the schools deem that they need more officers to help out, then they will be able to partake in this program. Law enforcement agencies shall submit a list of interested officers and qualifying officers to the LEAs within schools within 50 miles of the agency's headquarters and in the county in which their officers reside. Agencies shall not in any way disincentivize officers from participating. The officers will include off-duty, post-certified from Metro, City, County Sheriffs, Highway Patrol, TBI, as well as constables for those counties of us that do have constables in our counties. The carrying of a loaded handgun shall be required if the LA wants to participate. Let's talk a little bit about the payment. From civil asset forfeiture funds, the state will pay $54 per day that an officer works and $54 for after-school events. $50 of that would go directly to the officer. I don't intend for any fees, anything to be taken out of that. $2 would go to the LEA itself for administrative costs, and $2 would go to the agencies for administrative costs. The state will send the payment to the officers monthly and directly. If the civil asset forfeiture funds expire, the remainder will come from the state's rainy day fund. And we have put a 4-year sunset on this. This is meant to be an emergency measure, as the senator said. And so hopefully throughout the course of the next 4 years, we'll be able to come up with a permanent long-term solution. But this is an emergency measure for right now. All right, what questions we got?
What would you say to the smaller counties who feel like they want to participate, but they don't necessarily have the people to spare?
Well, first of all, this is voluntary on the officers' off-duty time. So if the officers feel like they want to do it off-duty, that's up to them. And again, we say the agencies shall not tell them they can't do this. And so, again, it's off-duty, so officers don't work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Some of them do work 24 hours, but not on a consistent basis. So if the officers choose to do this, the intent is for the officers to be able to volunteer for this.
And
the 50-mile radius.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Senator, if you want to say.
Well, I was just going to say the 50-mile radius makes plenty of opportunity for those small counties to reach out to neighboring counties. So they'll I think the resources will be there. I think our guys are going to step up. Our gals are going to step up and help.
Does this sort of negate the need to have teachers who are armed, which seems to be,
You know, that's
tougher.
that's
Of course, that is legal, but the training has been a big problem.
but that's actually for a later discussion. Right now, we're focusing on the need as of right now and putting an emergency stopgap in place right now, and that's why we have the sunset provision in there, and we will be coming up with a more permanent solution, and I'm sure that everything will be discussed.
Right. So we do have, there's discussion on both sides of this, you know, guns in school, then more security, less security. You all's response to, for example, in Florida, they had armed security there, and they remained outside of the building. Do you believe that this is for sure going to protect, no matter what, the students in the schools?
I would love to respond.
And how?
Well, we all want to jump.
Right. Let me say this. This is Tennessee, not Florida.
And I would make comments along the same lines.
What do you mean by that? I don't understand what you mean.
That means we expect our people to run in, not out.
Well, I mean, I have a question. Just SROs are at a lot of schools, so what does this change really about the situation in a lot of schools right now?
Well, the schools that already have SRs that deem that they do need more security, that would be up to them. They don't have to participate if they don't want to. If the school thinks that the SROs that they don't have are not enough, or that they don't have enough money to pay for more SROs, we will be offering, if this were to pass, 2 more. And so when it comes to securing our kids, you know, the LEAs know what they need at their schools, and hopefully this will enable them to be able to do that.
Are SROs always armed?
SROs, it's really up to the LEAs whether or not they want to arm their SROs or not.
Want to be there with a uniform on, not be armed.
If I could jump in here, Micah. No, on the question of SROs work. They deter bad actors, and when there's the potential that they're armed, sometimes that's enough. Mm-hmm. To answer the question though about competency, you don't create a program and change a program because one particular officer did or didn't do the right thing. It harkens back to when I was a young infantry platoon leader. If you had a platoon or a commander, and I had a platoon leader who didn't use his M60 machine guns well, you don't take the M60 machine guns away from him and give them to somebody else. You teach him how to use them. I don't know if that issue was training in Florida or if there was confusion. There appears to be some confusion as to what his intentions were. That shouldn't define whether or not we have SROs. We know SROs work, and we should put them in schools where they have them, get them more help, and where they don't have them, this program really will be an asset.
What's the 2 questions? Have you got any sense from the superintendent's group on, did you say where they are on this, supportive?
The TEA has said that they publicly support it. I did meet with some superintendent lobbyists this morning. They said they do not have any problems off the top, but again, they have to read the language.
And the second question is about the funds coming from the Civil Asset Forfeiture Fund group. Do you have a sense of what, you'll have a fiscal note attached to
yes,
this?
Sir.
And what sense that would be?
We'll know the specifics of the fiscal note after we submit the legal language to fiscal. With talking with groups, there are 1,817 schools in the state, but 1,800 schools in the state. If every school were to participate, you do the math, it would be around $39 million per year for 4 years. One of those groups had told me that they think only around a fourth would participate. If that is the case, then it will be around $9 million per year for 4 years.
What's the bill number?
Bill number is 2129.
You want me to say something about civil asset forfeiture?
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I could, about civil asset forfeiture, we just passed a bill out of Senate Judiciary that allows the comptroller to audit our current civil asset forfeiture. Right now, we don't even know exactly the scope of that, but these 2 bills will work together in that regard, and the comptroller will be out auditing how all of those dollars are spent and getting us an exact figure too.
And why that fund and exactly what is it?
Well, absolutely.
I think I know what it is.
The civil asset forfeiture funds is the funds that law enforcement collects from sales or directly seizing dollars from motorists in Tennessee. I don't want to get into the politics of it. And right here on this bill, if we want to talk later about civil asset forfeiture, there's a number of bills on it. And so the civil asset forfeiture funds are funds that have already been taken away from Tennesseans once. I think this is a good way to give it back to Tennesseans.
And not just Tennesseans, though.
Do you all anticipate, I mean, those drug task forces and those DAs like that money? Do you anticipate any pushback from them? Have you talked to them, and what do they say?
I have not heard from them. I do anticipate pushback from them.
I do have a question for Mr. Parks.
Yes.
Now, dealing with the situation in Memphis, 2 years ago, Memphis police were pulled out of the schools. And now, you know, I think it's 18 Shelby County schools that have Shelby County Sheriff SROs in them. Do you think you're going to get some pushback from Memphis police?
I don't anticipate that, no.
And why is that?
I don't. You know, well, based on the way the legislation is being drafted, of course, there can be no hindrance coming from the administration of the police department, the way this legislation is drafted. So those that want to work will be able to work.
Is there any, like, I can't think of the term right from my head, but is there any language that would prevent a district from replacing their SRO with one of these and just not adding anyone?
There is no language. That's up to the LEA if they want to do that.
They could just, I mean,
So they could supplant.
yeah.
Can I just address that just briefly?
Maintenance benefits.
Don't you think that after all that's happened, I think that is a hypothetical question that will never be anything that has to do with reality. I don't think there's a school in the country that's trying to have less security.
I do have two quick questions. One, as clarification, I think early on you mentioned something about storing. It's up to the school where they want to store, I guess, any of the firearms. Can you explain exactly what that is and any concerns that you may have about maybe students accessing any of this equipment that's stored?
The officers will be required to carry a loaded handgun to participate in this program. As far as the regulating of the rifles, I'm going to leave that up to the LEA. I think the LEAs know better than I do where safes would need to be located, whether or not they want their officers to have rifles in the schools or not, or in their cars or whatever. I'm going to leave that up to the LEA because they know their security situation better than I do. And I represent Washington County, and so there are 1,800 schools in the state. I just don't know personally. That's hard to legislate. We'll leave it up to the LEAs.
Any concerns that you may have, wherever they decide to store that, about loaded firearms being stored somewhere where anyone could possibly have access to those weapons?
Again, I'm going to leave that up to the LEA if they want to store it in a safe, which I would recommend if they were asking me. But my concern is with someone coming in to shoot up our school students, and the officers don't have the resources they need to stop that.
What if these officers decide that they want to become substitute teachers or teach anything? Wouldn't that be arming a teacher?
No.
Under this law, if someone's there under their capacity as a substitute teacher, again, I was a substitute teacher for 7 years, if they're here under this program, they would be able to carry a loaded handgun. If they're here as a substitute teacher, they would fall under the LEA's regulations, and I don't think they would allow that.
Do you put in here what constitutes a school day, and given sub pay, if you're looking at these as substitutes, it's more than $50 in most cases, and Metro would be $110 for a day. So do you think there's enough money here to actually attract officers to go into the school?
I would hope, as Tennesseans, and I've heard of many folks, at least in my area, that want to volunteer to do this. So I would hope that the answer would be yes, that we don't need money to attract folks to keep our kids safe. With the insurance concerns and the psychological concerns, we want to make sure that these are post-duty or post-certified off-duty officers. And one of the reasons, I'd love to have included veterans in this. One of the reasons I did not is because they would have to go through an extra step of evaluation and the insurance concerns, which officers are already covered. So that's why we went with post-duty, post-certified off-duty officers.
Can I ask a question about the training?
Yes, sir.
Does post-training always include school police training? Because the specific language of the Arming Teachers Bill is that it must be 40 hours of training in school policing. I'm just wondering, how is that addressed in terms of the training?
I'm not a law enforcement background, and so I know that the departments do train. If anybody has a law enforcement
Well, the
background.
post-certification training is the same. So that's the training we're talking about.
Okay, so it is.
It's
so
the
it
same,
does
yeah.
include school
That's-
training. It's
that's
not
right.
It's not a separate program.
As I understand it, Chaz.
Okay.
Senator Green, I was just wondering, since you represent the Senate Republican, do you feel the leadership is supportive of this?
I believe that they will be. Everybody wants to do something. And we know that SROs are effective in decreasing threats to the children. So I anticipate that everybody will be on board.
And I've asked the same question of the House Democrat leader, Stewart, who's been uncharacteristically silent over on the left there. Sorry, it's too easy. You feel everybody's supportive on your end?
I never speak for other members, but like I said earlier, it's a well-crafted bill. I'm struggling to think of anybody who'd be against it. It seems like it's a classic example of people coming together, coming up with a common sense solution that works for everybody and that should be easily passed.
You want to say anything?
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I think to pull it all together, this is about a common sense approach to a very difficult and complex problem. I think when we look at the SRO training, we look at evidence-based solutions, that this is our best option, is to take what we can track, data-wise analysis, put it in place. We'll have an opportunity to improve and modify it as necessary. The funding is what's critical. And if we're going to have any type of argument about whether there's a price that's not worth our children's lives and health, that legislator needs to get out of office. So I think that the prime sponsors have done a good job of beginning a conversation about a sensible solution to an immediate concern, and to also allow us to move forward in improving the way that we address school safety. If we understand that law enforcement brings not only training to the table, but experience when you talk about SROs. So they're going to get the additional training on top of their basic law enforcement training and bring the experience factor to the schools. That's as important as anything else. I'm not making a judgment on what happened down in Florida, but I can tell you that no one in here will know what you will do in a live fire situation unless you have been in that situation. You can have all the training in the world, but it's the experience that counts. And that's the benefit of having law enforcement experience and the basic law enforcement training from posts, plus the SRO training that will allow those same officers to be able to take that step before any violence, and that's the relationship with the students, being able to identify potential problems with students. That's part of what this bill will help to address. So it's a comprehensive approach, both immediate and long-term, that I think the sponsors have done a wonderful job of crafting the language.
Thank you. Representative Harlan.
What are the questions we have?
I just have one question. It's my last question. We're now, I know you all discussed, protecting our babies, which I absolutely understand. We're now in a day where students will likely be walking down the hallway to class with officers holding rifles. We're at that point. Your thoughts about putting together this legislation with those visions in mind? We're now, we have guards. We will have guards, sounds like, if this does make it through in the schools, almost kind of like a small military base. That's where we are. Your thoughts about that?
I've got a lot of thoughts for the cause of the moral decline of what's going on, but I'll save those thoughts for out in the hallway or up in my office. As far as a more, I guess, like you said, a prison camp type situation, I would much rather see armed officers walking in our hallways than the alternative.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
share something there.
You're making the assumption that the officers will carry rifles on a continuous basis. I think the sponsors intend for the rifles to be available for a response if necessary with long guns, but that there's also the consideration that you give to the psyche of the children and the faculty and the rest of the staff, that you make it as easy
on the student emotionally and mentally and psychologically as possible, which means that they won't be going around strapped to where it looks like what you described. That's part of the SRO training, that they will learn how to not necessarily blend in the background, but to be visible only to the point to where they provide a deterrence.
If I could add to that, I think the heart of your question strikes at the cultural challenges that we face across the country and the behavioral health issues. And that's why when we started this thing, I said this is an emergency stopgap measure. There are comprehensive challenges that we face that this bill doesn't necessarily cover. In Clarksville, we have about 180,000 people. We have one psychiatrist. There is a real behavioral health crisis in America, and we have to address that. This bill doesn't. This bill is an emergency stopgap measure to get someone in our school systems protecting our kids. And that's why I'm, so supportive of it. We'll tackle the other issues. And I really appreciate the author of the bill putting the sunset in there. So we're under a gun. I shouldn't say that. We're under a not to be insensitive. We're under a time limit, and we're gonna work very hard to address all of the pieces of this thing. But yeah, it breaks my heart to see where the country is, to see video games that glorify killing. In the military, back when I was a young cadet at West Point, we learned that 1 in 3 soldiers would actually pull the trigger. And so when we would train men and women who would go to war, we'd have them shoot a human silhouette so that they could get over that barrier. Now kids coming into the military, it's not a problem because they're killing on video games, and it's so easy, and the switch is flipped. And now we're faced with this unbelievable dilemma, this cultural issue. We're confronting it today. Some great legislation being written by these guys. And again, I'm honored to be a part of it, but it is just fixing this issue today. The other stuff, we got to get on top of that too.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for being here. Thank y'all for coming.
Yeah,
And
thank
for
you.
hard, critical questions, because that's what